All right.
Showtime.
Good evening and welcome to Gamesplaining. This audio series features myself, Eric Crosby, writer and creator of several video essays concerning popular game franchises, and Jake Clark, who has played a sum total of 2 video games to completion in his life. In each episode, Jake will bring me the title of a game that he has chanced across, and I will do my level best to explain its mechanics, narrative, and cultural importance in a timely fashion. Along the way, Jake will impart careful selections of his encyclopedic knowledge of literature, film, and history. If we each do our jobs correctly, then you, dear listener, may leave with slightly more knowledge than you arrived. And with that, my co-host, Jake Clark.
You're too kind to me, Eric, in that introduction. I gotta say right now, I pick up trivia the way like a dropped sponge picks up incriminating evidence, Occasionally it's there. Sometimes even when necessary.
Sure. So do you think there's any more description we need to give besides that of what we're doing here?
I don't really think so. I think we can kind of get into it. I think it might
Perfect.
benefit to describe how I kind of found the title, at least for this one.
Okay.
Because I'm not hugely plugged into the game discourse. I do see some essays from it, like essays from Noah Caldwell-Gervais, that kind of thing, and like some lore videos sometimes. But my experience playing the game obviously doesn't really kind of exist most of the time, and I'm definitely not in the discourse, so I get very haphazard exposure to news.
Right.
But one game that I've heard about a couple times, and this popped up on your suggestion when you told me to go to like the front page of it. It's this which one is the Kotaku.
Yeah.
And just take a look at the things that were there. Now, in the middle of an article about hot tub streamers that had nothing to do with games at all, the sidebar mentioned a game which is a installment in a series, which I'm given to understand has been going on for quite a while. And I've seen a film adaptation of.
Okay.
The film adaptations also constitute a series that I think diverges pretty heavily from the games. I have no idea. That's part of what we're going to cover here. So, 2-word title. The first one, someone who lives in a place. And the second, bad.
Right. I had an inkling that this might be the game that you chose, simply because I knew it was in the discourse right now. So I had a feeling that if you went to Kotaku, you might see this game. So I've played only 2 of the Resident Evil games ever. So I don't know. Do you think we should go with one of your backups, or do you think we should try going down this road? Because I do think I can talk about this one, but maybe not as much as something else.
Let's go with this. Let's see what happens.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, To start then, I guess I'll start by explaining what I understand to be the kind of the core of Resident Evil, the series. So the games I've played are Resident Evil 2, the remake, not the original version, but the remake, which I'm given to understand is a very good adaptation of the original and also very good at being a Resident Evil game. And I've also played Resident Evil 7, which is the direct predecessor to the most recent game, Resident Evil Village, which is the one that you probably saw mentioned on Kotaku. And so Resident Evil is a horror franchise, which concerns a kind of rotating cast of main characters. So in the first game, you have Chris Redfield and oh man, I can't even remember the other character's name. I've never played the first game, so I don't really know much about that one. But I do know Resident Evil 2. The protagonists that you can play as are mainly Leon Kennedy, a police officer, and Clara Redfield, who I'm not really sure what her job or role is actually, but she's obviously related to Chris Redfield, who's one of the protagonists of the first game. And anyhow, these characters, in Resident Evil 2 at least, and I think in Resident Evil 1 as well, find themselves in some kind of labyrinthian space. So in 2, the one that I've played, it's mainly set in a police station, but the police station is like converted from an old museum. So there's like weird artifacts and stuff lying around. The architecture is very strange, and you kind of have to go around and solve puzzles and stuff to progress through the game in a non-linear fashion. But the main baddies of Resident Evil are always these zombies, and the lore of how these zombies is created though is pretty wild compared to other zombie fiction. Resident Evil is a lot more science fiction horror than it is like regular zombie horror. The enemies in Resident Evil 2 and 7, the ones that I've played, they go from like being kind of normal wacky zombies to being like huge mangled tentacle beasts and things like that. And the gameplay of Resident Evil is survival horror, as it's called. The survival horror genre is essentially you as the protagonist have very limited resources with which to engage your enemies, or perhaps none at all. In Resident Evil's case, usually you have a selection of firearms and one melee weapon, which is usually a knife. And but the ammunition for your firearms is very scarce. So the whole game's kind of about conserving ammo and trying your best to take out these zombies or whatever enemy you happen across, while using as little of your resources as possible. And this adds a lot of tension to the experience because you're constantly trying to battle through these zombies without actually using your guns, basically. So you'll find yourself often circling around them, sidestepping them, trying to find a way through spaces without actually engaging. And another thing Resident Evil is quite notable for is for its as I mentioned, it's quite science fiction story. It gets quite bizarre and involves several strange apocalyptic events.
So the movies take this is interesting. You mentioned to me this sort of survival horror element because I'm a person who reacts very strongly to zombies. I used to be I put off like watching 28 Days Later, Night of the Living Dead for a long time because that's one of the things that really kind of got me in the lizard brain. And the movie Resident Evil is like the movie I saw. I don't know where they're going with that because almost none of that description sounds familiar. There's an Alice in Wonderland reference for most of the movie. Like the heroine is played by Mila Jovovich. And she's an amnesiac named Alice, who is kind of, I guess, drafted into a special forces team to break into this underground labyrinth where they've been creating this zombie virus. And
that actually sounds remarkably accurate to the game plot, except for the name of the protagonist so far.
Interesting. Okay. There is a guy named, I remember there is a man named James Shade, who I think runs it, which is just a great name. Like, hey, I'm Shade.
Yeah, he's not villainous at all.
He might have actually sounded like that. I can't remember very clearly. There is another man who I thought was the man from Grey's Anatomy. I haven't seen Grey's Anatomy, but there's a remarkable resemblance. And it turns out he was not. And then there are there are some of these mutants, but mostly it's just zombies.
Right.
And then they come up in the end and they realize, as far as I'm aware, that the city is in ruins and zombies everywhere. And I haven't seen the movies subsequent to that, at least in full, but I have seen bits of, I think it was like Apocalypse, where they have a thing where they're repeatedly cloning Alice in order to fight the zombies or fight, I guess, the Gestalt intelligence of the zombies. I'm not entirely sure what the rules are, but it got pretty out there pretty quick.
Yeah. So while you've been talking, I looked up how many Resident Evil games there are, because I've played 2, and there are 26 of them, including remakes and re-releases, I believe. So not all their own bespoke stories, but what you describe of the film is surprisingly kind of accurate to the tone of the game. I feel like describing it as survival horror makes it seem a little more self-serious than it actually is. Like usually in these games, the first half is pretty gritty, down in the dirt horror. Thinking particularly of Resident Evil 7, the whole first half of the game is just fighting these well, not even really fighting. Um, a main mechanic in a lot of the games is a pursuer enemy, so like a huge, super tough enemy you can't kill that will follow you around and make every area dangerous for you. And so the first half of Resident Evil 7 is kind of flipping between a couple of these nemesis type enemies, in like a kind of what would you call it, a dilapidated kind of hillbilly esque house. The enemies are very like country trash kind of people. I'm trying to say this nicely. I don't know
Texas
how to say this
Chainsaw Massacre,
nicely.
but with actual
Yeah,
zombies rather than just cannibals.
yeah, pretty much. But then around the halfway mark, almost always, I've come to understand from osmosis, usually about halfway through, you end up going underground and discovering that there's some strange science fiction plot behind what's going on. So when I think about Resident Evil 2, the version of it that I played, it was pretty grounded zombie horror for most of the first half, and I really enjoyed that angle a lot. Like even though I am pretty tired of zombie fiction in general, the way it was done was very tense and exciting. And particularly the pursuer enemy in that game, Mr. X. He's like this huge, mutated, kind of weird Hulk-looking guy with a hat on. He's got like a trilby on, which is, you can shoot off his head for fun. He will follow you around into your safe rooms and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty goddamn effective at provoking horror. But then like halfway through, you end up underground in these labs run by Umbrella, who are like the main kind of the main antagonists. There's always
It's the same corporation in the movie too. Yeah.
yeah. There's always a threat behind the threat, right? And Umbrella are the people that make the zombies. And I believe that the reason they make the zombies is because they were trying to make like super soldiers, essentially, like Captain America style super soldiers. But the virus that they were using to provoke this kind of super strength or whatever ended up making people zombies, and they all got out and started biting people and making them more zombies, and so on and so forth until entire cities get infected by this virus.
So I remember from the beginning of the movie. The movie takes. I don't know if they are actually trying to make super soldiers in the movie, but I distinctly remember in the beginning the movie is an ad for one of their products, which is a beauty project that will bring your dead cells to life. I can see that happening. This is the slightly less ethical Purdue Pharma.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think I think you've identified what is a major theme in all the games, which is the kind of interplay between corporate ethics or lack thereof, and militarism, and the kind of pursuit of science at any cost, those kinds of themes. And I think the later games, like 4 and 5 and 6, become much more action oriented, and you end up in these kinds of more military engagements, big guns, big machine guns, that kind of stuff. And the encounters become less about dealing with like small zombies and trying to conserve ammo, and more about taking on big hawking hordes of zombies with machine guns. But I could be totally wrong about that. I haven't played those ones, as I said.
And the newest one is set in the Middle Ages.
No.
No.
So I've been pretty diligently avoiding spoilers for this game, for the new one, Village. But I know a bit about it. For one, it's a direct sequel to Resident Evil 7. It stars a man named Ethan Winters, I think. And in Resident Evil 7, he shows up at this kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre house, like you said, to find his missing girlfriend, Mia. And then
kind of place that doesn't cost very much but hard to resell.
Yeah. And after a lot of strange happenings, he does end up finding Mia, but she's already been infected by some wild thing, some wild science fiction thing. And and so she tries to kill Ethan. Hijinks ensue, and eventually he gets her back, and the two end up settling down together, having a child. And then, from what I know of 8, at the very beginning of Resident Evil 8 Village, the most recent game, Chris Redfield, the one of the protagonists of the first game, and fan favorite, he's kind of the badass military man that everybody loves in the games. He shows up at Ethan's house and is just like, "Hey, I'm stealing your baby. It's important. Bye." And then he leaves, and Ethan ends up tracking him to this village, which is the setting of the game, and the title, the eponymous village, which is kind of this this medieval-esque European village in a mountain range. I think there's a castle, there's a manor, all that good stuff, but it's still very much set in modern times, and very much still does have that science fiction angle to it as well. Again, I think from what I've heard, the first half is basically your good old zombie monster horror, but it's less zombies and more like lichens and vampires in this one. And then after the halfway point, you once again end up going underground and discovering strange science fiction happenings.
See, what I thought, seeing the promotional materials, was that it was some kind of back in time thing.
Yeah.
Like, the zombie virus has always existed, except like what was it, like I don't know, like, in World War Z when they describe the zombie invasion outbreaks through history, like they have one at Hadrian's Wall.
Yep.
I thought it was that kind of thing.
That would be pretty cool. I think a Resident Evil game set in medieval times, or even like a zombie game in general that was like swords and hacking and slashing, would be pretty cool. But yeah, it's I lost my train of thought. Hold on. Oh god, yeah, I've completely lost what I was going to say.
Like, kind of following up with that, like I definitely see that as being pretty interesting. I mean, just like from a film / zombie survival guide perspective, right? Like, there's this thing where, human teeth aren't that good at aren't like breaking through things. Like, there's like in World War Z, where the zombies are the movie World War Z, which is another case of the movie being a
I've read the book and seen the movie, so I do know what you're talking about.
Just say a bit of adaptive dissonance.
Yeah.
Different kind of. But in that one, he does the thing you do when you think you're about to deal with like a feral animal. He wraps a magazine around his arm. Like, human teeth aren't that great. Like, that would definitely work. If you have armor, all you got to do is just wade through the zombies with the mace.
Yeah. This is what I don't understand about Resident Evil. Now, given a lot of the times they end up fighting spooky plant freaks who have tentacles and spiked barbs and such, but at least for dealing with the basic zombies, why don't they make some body armor for these soldiers, like the Umbrella soldiers that have to go in and contain these threats? Like, they have helmets, sure, but they're just wearing like normal SWAT gear from what I've seen.
I mean, that should do it.
Yeah, I guess if they're wearing some Kevlar and they've got some padding on their arms and stuff, but I don't know.
There was in the movie I saw, there was one other monster, which does seem like it would foil the armor, which was a large man walking on all fours, I believe no eyes, and possibly with tentacles. A really long tongue. I think it was called the Licker. Like
Yep. There's lickers in the games too. Yeah, I think there's lickers in Resident Evil 2. They're like, I think they can only hear, like they can't see, but they can hear you. But if you make noise, they run real fast at you and eat you.
Yeah, like this thing, I think they had to kill it by putting it on like a rail, like it was on a train, and they had to like get it onto the tracks to have it basically get dismembered by the wheels.
That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, the movie was. I remember the movie being zany. I actually can't remember that much about it. Come to think of it, like I think it was kind of like I think they were just running from zombies most of the time.
Yeah,
and like Mila Jovovich a lot of over the place. I mean, that'll sell a movie. That's
sure. Yeah, doing backflips and spandex and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like a red dress.
Oh. Wait, is she supposed... Oh, man. Okay, so there's a character in Resident Evil 2 called Ada Wong who shows up in a red dress. I wonder if maybe Mila Jovovich's character is supposed to be some kind of adaptation of Ada Wong.
So
except that Mila Jovovich, as far as I know, is not an Asian woman.
Really?
So I feel like there's some disconnect in that.
Do you?
I feel like maybe. I feel like maybe she's not an Asian woman.
Here's another question I have regarding the series. Now, this is kind of one thematically.
Yeah.
But the movie makes a lot of an Alice in Wonderland analogy, which is a good
Right.
sign, that there's like, I wonder if that is, because that's a very common thing you get when you have a director or screener like, no, we got to add a literary overtone to this.
Yeah. It's the Zack Snyder sucker punch thing.
Oh, God in heaven.
Was Sucker Punch based on a comic, or was that just Zack Snyder's mind?
I feel like it was based on posters he had in his dorm room.
Probably posters of the Resident Evil movie, to be honest.
Maybe. I mean, I think, would he have been? I think he would have been working by then. But like
even still, there's a lot of you could have Mila Jovovich in this movie in Sucker Punch,
Yeah.
And the Alice in Wonderland thing, like that's just such a dude bro screenwriter approach to handling a story about a female character.
Well, as a, something of a dude bro screenwriter character, or wait, damn it. As someone who's read Alice in Wonderland a lot, I should say.
Yep.
Like you see it a lot because it's like there's a lot of fun bits to reference, I guess.
Yeah.
Like there's these things where it's like it's the AI in the movie. This I remember really clearly.
Wait, there's an AI in the movie?
Yeah, the AI is like the main antagonist.
Oh God. Okay, that's definitely not in the games I played.
The AI kind of locks them into this lab and then sicks the zombies on them. I'm pretty sure is the mechanism. But then like the AI is the Red Queen.
Huh, okay.
The AI also looks like a child who looks like Alice Liddell.
Right.
So that was a point that I thought was kind of interesting. I don't know how that would crop up in the games at all.
There is a lot of little girls that represent some great evil in those games. Like in Resident Evil 7, the reason that there's kind of a zombie outbreak in this region that you find yourself in is because of this little girl. Oh man, what was her name? Hold on, let me look this up.
Daddy, can I unleash the flesh-eating virus on the city? Oh, okay, honey. This time, sure.
Oh man.
The rivers shall run red with their blood. Okay, now it's just like the South Park Mickey Mouse.
Oh yeah, okay. So her name was Evelyn. She's like this little child who I believe has like psychic powers or something, and she can just kill people without touching them or doing anything to them. I'm trying to remember what happened in the game. You end up on this old decrepit ship, which is a great setting for horror, I think, because it's very claustrophobic. And there's this little girl. You kind of do like a flashback, and there's this little girl running rampant on this ship, just causing chaos and killing people. And I think, if I recall, because a lot of the main enemies in that game are called the molded. They're kind of a spore-based infection mold creature thing. I think she just kills people with spores or something. It's something like that, where it's just completely non-physical. She just looks at you and you die.
The thing that I find least probable is that it's a small child named Evelyn.
Yeah. I think that was well, she's not a child when you meet her in the game. She's a child like back in time, and it's kind of a flashback sequence when you see her as a kid. In the game, when you find her, she's an old woman by the time you meet her.
Okay,
so she's not a 2000s Gen Z kid named Evelyn.
I feel like Evelyn's a good name for it was like, I'm pretty sure it was the name for like the mother on 2.5 Men. So that's what I'm picturing. Who I'm pretty sure could also kill people with a stare.
It's a wholesome grandma name, Evelyn.
I mean, in this movie, clearly not. But
yeah,
this one goes with spores. So does the ways by which the zombies are made change each game? Is the theme just they're zombies?
Yeah, they're they're not necessarily zombies in every game, right? Like in 7, it's these molded creatures, which are like they're pretty scary looking, to be honest. I think they're really good horror because they have this kind of like if you've ever seen like black mold, they look like that, but with a bunch of like teeth, like radial teeth coming out of them. And they can like form themselves into the walls so they can hide from you and jump out at you and stuff. But from what I understand, there are different viruses. So there's the T virus, which is the zombie one, that makes the Titans and the zombies in the earlier games. And then there's also the G virus, and then there's another virus as well, which makes people into fish monsters.
I mean, the G virus, I imagine, just gives everybody a sick baseline. Your boss is just a giant, like, is just a I guess like a giant guy who just shakes the earth like.
The T virus is the one that makes them zombies, and the G virus is the one that makes them into eyeball creatures.
Okay.
The more tentacly eyeball weirdo looking ones. And you encounter more of those as the games go on. Usually you start with the normal zombies or zombie-like enemies where they're human-sized and try to eat you. And then as you go on, you end up fighting these horrific tentacle monsters with a giant glowing eye that you have to shoot to do like extra damage. You know the boss fight trope. There's a weak point that's big and flashy and glowing red usually in these games.
Yeah,
and you just shoot that a bunch of times
to hit it. Yeah. When you say giant eyeball, I am just thinking the eyeball from Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Not far off. It's kind of like that, okay. But usually glowing in some sickly color. So in Resident Evil 2, they glow yellow on these things. I'm not sure if it's always yellow or not, but I think it might be.
So the idea in each game is you spend like the first half fighting zombies or the equivalent, like mold people, whatever.
Yep.
The fish people, is that a Shadow over Innsmouth kind of thing? Is that just my Lovecraft brain?
They're less Innsmouth looking. They don't have the Innsmouth look about them. They more just look like zombies with fins and scales, I think.
Interesting. Okay, so kind of so black mold people, fish people, regular zombies. They're all basically zombies, kind of thing.
Yeah, essentially. Like at least again for the first half, and the new one, it's like lichens and gargoyles and vampires and stuff. But again, all like human-sized, human-shaped enemies.
Kind of shambling, ravenous creatures that you kind of have to deal with numbers of, and then they kind of add on these.
Not usually very fast, but very tough. So you don't have to worry about like running away as much, unless they're kind of behind you. So it's more about managing your resources and your positioning, because they can't pursue you very easily. So you just have to make sure you're making every shot count.
It's easier to run and to hide than to fight.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of as you go through the games. Usually you'll end up running your ammo pretty dry around the halfway point, and you'll just be running around not shooting anything for a sizable chunk of the game because you have no ammo with which to do so. And then after that, usually they give you a flamethrower or a machine gun or some other huge thing to start blasting people away with.
So in the first part of the game, you're hunted by a multitude of things that have little to no intelligence. And then for the second half of the game, you're hunted by something significantly stronger and smarter.
Yeah.
That note.
The pursuers are a kind of franchise staple, I think. In Resident Evil 3, it's called the Nemesis, and it can like break through walls, that kind of stuff. Whereas normal enemies, if you hide in a different room, they can't find you, right? You're hidden. So they kind of shake up your rhythms and force you to adapt, and not just cower in the corner, basically. But because you can't kill them as well, you do just have to keep moving, keep running, trying to do your objectives, solve the puzzles before they get to you.
So do you end up having to kill them in the end? I assume that these guys are the final bosses.
Yeah. In 2 and not as much in 7, but in 2 definitely the last boss is like a weird juiced up version of Mr. X from earlier on. And I'm pretty sure it's the same with 3, where the Nemesis, the big Nemesis enemy is your big final encounter. And the The one, I don't know if she's the only one. I think there's more than one, but in the new game, the nemesis enemy that's been quite popular is this Lady Dimitrescu character. Have you seen this character, Jake?
I think I've seen cosplays of this character, which is part of what
Yeah,
suggested this episode.
yeah, exactly. This character who is actually not in very much of the game, due to several notable qualities, has become quite popular with the game enjoying public, and has sparked much fan art, much cosplay, and she ended up becoming a really huge part of the game's marketing because of that. Like she was kind of not, I don't think, supposed to be as big of a part of the marketing as she was until they realized, oh yeah, people like the lady with the big breasts.
Just this terrifying Romanian aristocrat with a gigantic hat and a cigarette holder.
Yep, and claws.
Oh, like Freddy Krueger's claws.
Yeah, she's got even bigger than Freddy Krueger's claws. They're huge. They could stab through your entire skull, I'm pretty sure. I think that's how she kills you, actually, if she finds you. She just stabs her claws through your skull.
Yikes, and I'm assuming...
It's not very pleasant.
I'm assuming Dimitrescu, she is a vampire.
I think so. I haven't played the game, but that's what I think. I think she's supposed to be a vampire of some kind.
Okay.
And she has these 3 daughters, which are kind of like her coven, or her... whatever you call it. What's the vampire equivalent of a coven?
Well, that's a Dracula reference. Like, there's the 3 brides of Dracula that Van Helsing, I think, ends up killing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's one of the things, I haven't read Dracula in a while, but that's one of the things that is quite chilling about the original encounter that not Harker, who is it? Is it Harker? Yeah, it's Harker has there is the brides showing up and clearly wanting to, I guess, drink him.
Yep.
And very nearly succeeding a couple times. I haven't read the book in a while.
I've never read Dracula. I was actually thinking about reading it lately. I need to brush up on my horror classics, I think. After I watched that new Castlevania show, and it stars Dracula in a very large role, so I thought maybe reading the book at some point would be a good idea.
I want to say, like, Dracula is one of those books where you get to know the characters really well.
Yeah.
Like, I think that might be the reason for its many adaptations, is that the characters are much more important than the plot. And Dracula probably isn't one of them. Like, it is a lot more like about Harker and, I guess, is it Dr. Seward? I think it's Dr. Seward, than it is about Dracula. I would say. It's hard to say, right? Like, is it? I've seen a lot of adaptations of Dracula. And like you can play it a lot of different ways, mostly because it's really hard to adapt the actual book.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's the one with Gary Oldman and Keanu Reeves might be the best, probably.
Oh, you're not going to give it to Christopher Lee?
Oh, sure. Perish the thought, I forgot. I think he might be the best Dracula.
Yeah.
Although even then, Gary Oldman's very good.
Gary Oldman can do anything, I think. And do it well.
The original Todd Browning movie is amazing. I mean, we're talking about loose adaptations here. That's an adaptation so loose it's not even a solid.
Yeah.
Their Harker and Renfield are essentially the same character.
Right.
Or at least Renfield assumes Harker's role, I think, towards the start of it. And it's 80 minutes long. There's not a lot. It's an interesting movie on its own right, but it is a bizarre adaptation.
Yeah. And well, they, like you say, bringing it back to Resident Evil, bringing it back to the game. I think it's interesting you mentioned the character focus, because I think that's kind of why people like Resident Evil so much, the gamer culture at large, because the game's plot usually, I think, is pretty nonsensical. But it's driven by this cast of characters that kind of rotates in and out in each game, right? So you've got Chris Redfield, you've got Claire Redfield, you've got Leon Kennedy, and all these characters kind of switch out the starring role, almost like an anthology series. In each game, they'll rotate in a few people, and then you can also play through the games again, usually as 2 or 3 other characters, to see their perspective on the same story. So it's less about the actual events that occur and more about the characters and how they process it and react to it, which I think is why people like the series so much. You really get into the protagonists, and you get to see all these seeing different angles in the same story is always a fun storytelling device, I think.
All right. I think I've got an idea. Do we want to test my understanding of this?
Sure, yeah. Give me what you think Resident Evil is.
So, character-based franchise, essentially, that
Yep,
centers around the theme of being hunted.
yep,
In broad strokes. Then you get various degrees of zombification, various degrees of. I guess it does seem to me right now that they're going through different varieties of horror. Because knowing now that, like, say, there's vampires and werewolves in this one, or that there's mold people, or there's fish people, it seems
yep.
like the zombies are more ancillary. What I thought it was going to be was different ways of dealing with the Umbrella Corporation for each
Right.
one. Because that's kind of what the movies are about, as I'm aware.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're pretty close there, yeah.
All right.
I think given my my lacking knowledge of the franchise, I feel like you've come to what I would consider an understanding of what these games are.
There we go. We'd call that a success.
I think so.
Anything more to say here, or shall we wrap up?
No, I think that's good enough. So thank you, dear listener, for engaging on this journey with us, and let us know what you thought. There is a Discord that you can join to converse, to debate whether or not I explained this game series well. If you want to push back against any of the things we said, of course, the forum is open. So please engage with us if you like.
Yeah, come at me.
Indeed. All right. Well, this is Eric Crosby signing off.
I'm Jake Clark. Cheers.
Cheers.